Hello everyone, welcome to another segment of intellectual brainstorming and academic excellence. My name is David Oni and my YouTube channel is David Oni with WIZ. As you all know, this platform is for intellectual brainstorming and it is meant to help a lot of our students out there, most especially those in political science and government in secondary school, so that they can be able to come out in flying colors in their academic careers. Today, before we go into our topic, we want to use this medium to say a very big thank you to our subscribers that have been coming over to watch our videos. Our returning subscribers, to say a big thank you. And if you have not subscribed to this channel, we want to plead with you to do the same, because there are a lot of things that we are actually uploading on YouTube now that you can benefit. It can help you in your area of academics one way or the other. Then for those that have not subscribed, please subscribe. Then please drop your comments, click on the notification button and click on that like button so that you can motivate us to bring more of videos to you every time. So today we're going to look at what we call foreign policy. Foreign policy. This topic is actually meant for those in their institution, in the university, and I believe at the end of this topic you'll be able to benefit more from this topic. Now let's start. When you're talking about foreign policy, it's one of the central topic in the study of international relations, and this is because of the nature of the international system, which makes the international interdependence among states inevitable. So what we're saying is that states, there is no independence in the world. States depend on each other for what? For relations. You understand? So there is a level of, or a high level of interdependence among the nations. And why is this possible? Because of the inequitable distribution of the resources. So it is through foreign policy that states can relate with each other. So without foreign policy, states cannot relate with each other. So foreign policy is very, very, very important. So foreign policy as a conscious behavior of a national state towards the external environment. So we can see that foreign policy is a conscious behavior of national state towards the external environment. You understand? So that's what we're saying. So in some quarters, it is also used as as a political influence by one state to induce other states to exercise power in a manner desired by the state concerned. So foreign policy is used as an instrument by state to induce other states to exercise power in a manner desired by the state concerned. So foreign policy involves a relationship between two or more states, or between one group of states or another group of states, or between one state or another group of states. You understand? So that's what we're saying there. So foreign policy is also viewed as a pre-planned action and not unconscious action of a state. So what we're saying that what we refer to as foreign policy is a pre-planned action of a state and not an unconscious action of state. So foreign policy, in other words, is the action of state or what states do in international system. So what states do what international system is referred to as a foreign policy. It is based on what? On the action and what? And the reaction. So foreign policy is based on what? An action and what? And reaction. The action of the state and the reaction of what? Of the other state is what we're referring to as a foreign policy. So for instance, Nigeria can react to an action by South Africa. Both countries can be set up for be conducting foreign policy. If Nigeria is interacting with South Africa, they are conducting what we call a foreign policy. In foreign policy, the centrality of the state must be emphasized. This means that it is only the state that do formulate and conduct foreign policy. So it is only the state that would have conduct and formulate foreign policy, though there may be other non-state actions or actors, non-state actors. So other actors can be used, which are what? Are non-state actors that can be used to annex the foreign objective or what? Policy of the state, but they do not in themselves constitute foreign policy. So when you're talking about non-actors, you're talking about non-state actors. So what we're saying there is that they can be used to annex the foreign policy of the state, but they themselves do not constitute what is called a foreign policy. So, so when you talk about foreign policy is fundamentally concerned with the pursuit and defense of national interest. Foreign policy is what? Is fundamentally concerned with the pursuit and defense of national interest. Now, we have two types of national interest. We have what we call core national interest, and we have what we call variable national interest. Variable national interest. So we could look at what we mean by the two of them. Now, the core interest, which is number one, are those that are dear, and states will not be willing to go to war over them. So what we're saying there is that when you talk about core national interest, we are talking about interests that are non-negotiable. They are not negotiable. A state can go over war because of this interest. They don't joke with them. So those are the core national interests. For example, Nigeria also has what we call core national interest. So, for example, Nigeria has what we call core national interest. So that's very, very important. Take note of that. So the second one, which is the variable interest, is one that states can afford to give up. Even though they are useful, states do not feel they are inevitable. So what we're saying there is that the variable national interests are things that the state can decide to give up on. They can decide to give up on because though they are important, but they are not something that a state or nation state can go into war with. So they are not something that we can go into war with. So what are then let us look at the three basic foreign policy orientations. What are the three basic foreign policy orientations? The three basic foreign policy orientations. Then the first one is what we call isolationism. The second one is what we call neutrality. Then the third one is what we call non-alignment. The first one is what we call isolationism. The second one is what we call neutrality. The third one is what we call non-alignment. So let us look at them one after the other. Now, when you talk about isolationism, before the Second World War, the United States of America was engaged in what we call a foreign policy called isolationism. The United States was engaged in what we call isolationism. Now, at that time, America decided to look inward, to build our economy, to build our military, to build itself up, to become what we call a world power. So America decided to isolate itself from the rest of the world. That policy is what we call isolationism. Now, what do we mean by isolationism? It means infrequent interaction with other states. It means what? Infrequent interaction with other states. It is a desire or deliberate policy not to devote much resources to the conduct and pursuit of foreign policy in order to concentrate effort on domestic development. So when a country decides to do such a thing, it is called isolationism. For example, I said before the advent of the Second World War, America was engaged in what we call isolationism. Decided to develop itself internally. So it decided not to take part, in international relations. So it's a policy. Isolationism is a policy on another what we call foreign policy. So in the past, states used to pursue it for security reasons, but this is no longer a guarantee for security. Before, states used to pursue isolationism because of security, because of some purpose or some reasons. But today, it cannot guarantee what we call security. So number two is what we call neutrality. What do we mean by neutrality? This is a situation where a state has the backing of international law to be excluded from international relations. We decide to remain neutral, to sit on the fence. You don't want to take part or support any group against the other one. So the neutral states are protected from attack during the war, and their ships could sail international water without being attacked. They are under obligation not to allow their territories to be used during war. So under neutrality, it is backed by international law that in a conflict or in a period of war or anything, a country can decide to be neutral. Neutrality. So because of that, they are given certain privileges in a period of war, that their state cannot be, they cannot be attacked during the war, and their territories cannot be used during a war, and their ships, whenever they are sailing on international water, they cannot be attacked because of their neutrality. That is number 2. So we have mentioned isolationism, then we have mentioned neutrality. Then the third one is what we call non-alignment. So this is a foreign policy orientation that most developing countries came up with during the Cold War. During the Cold War between the United States and the Union of Soviet Socialist Republic, a lot of African countries decided to be non-aligned. They decided not to oppose one group against another group. They decided to stay on their own. That is non-aligned. They are being non-aligned. At that time, it was called non-aligned movement. During the Cold War, it emerged from the hostility of the Cold War and the desire of these countries not to be dragged into the Cold War. It suggests that non-aligned members are not tied to any of the ideological bloc, in the international system, and by so doing, they can contribute to international peace. Like I said before, countries can decide to be non-aligned, and by so doing, they will not join any ideological bloc or ideological movement, at that particular time. So let us now look at the environment of foreign policy. We have what we call domestic environment, and we have what we call external environment. Now, when you talk about domestic environment, every foreign policy is first produced by domestic environment of the country in question. So, the determinant of a foreign policy will be determined by the domestic environment of that particular country, of that particular country. And that is why theoreticians believe that foreign policy is a continuation or a reflection of the country's domestic policy. In Nigeria, for instance, our foreign policies are affected by our domestic economic performance, religious, politics, etc. So when we are talking about our, domestic policy, our foreign policy, it is determined by our internal factor, our domestic factor, our domestic environment. There are domestic pressure groups like students, businessmen, and each of these groups is often interested in what finally emerges as a foreign policy. For instance, the issue of Nigeria re-establishing diplomatic relations with Israel has been influenced by the nature of our domestic politics. Foreign policy, like I said, is influenced by domestic activities. So the domestic activities of a country will determine the foreign policy posture of that country. So the domestic environment will influence Nigeria's foreign policies. So domestic pressure groups like ASU, NSC, NAS, and the rest of them, they often have influence on Nigeria's foreign policy. That's why we say that foreign policies are divided into two: domestic environment and an external environment. Now let us look at what we call the external environment. Now, if you're talking about external environment, you're referring to actions that take place outside the country's border. So, since foreign policy is both action and reaction, states often react to the actions of other states which could be outside their territory. So, what we're saying here is that the external environment will also condition Nigeria's foreign policy. We condition Nigeria's foreign policy. So, we are going to stop on those two for now. So, we've mentioned what we call the environment of foreign policy. So, now let us now quickly look at what we call objectives of foreign policy. Objectives of foreign policy. We've mentioned the environment. We said domestic environment and the external environment. When we talk about external environment, we are talking about those actions and reactions that takes place outside the country as it affects the domestic foreign policy of a particular country, including Nigeria. So what are the objectives of foreign policy? Number one, we have what we call self-preservation. Self-preservation.